The night Caleb Mercer asked a complete stranger to pretend to be his girlfriend, he had no idea that by sunrise, the woman sitting beside him would become the person he was most afraid of losing. What began as a desperate favor at a crowded family dinner in Charleston, South Carolina, was supposed to last only a few hours. There would be no promises, no complicated feelings, and certainly no future. But sometimes life changes direction in the smallest moments, when two lonely people recognize something familiar in each other's silence. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness, hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances can change a person's life, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Caleb was 32 and successful enough that everyone assumed he had everything figured out. He owned a small architectural firm, lived in a beautiful apartment overlooking the Cooper River, and had spent years building a life that looked impressive from the outside. What nobody knew was that he had quietly stopped believing in love after watching his parents' marriage collapse. His father had left when Caleb was 17, promising to return once he had sorted his life out, but years passed without the promised return. Caleb learned early that people could make beautiful promises and still disappear. So he kept everyone at a careful distance. Then came the invitation to his grandmother Margaret's 70th birthday dinner. His entire extended family would be there, including his cousin Rebecca, who had never stopped teasing him about being single. Caleb knew exactly what would happen. His relatives would surround him with questions, sympathy, and unsolicited advice. Worse, his grandmother had recently recovered from a difficult year and Caleb didn't want her celebration overshadowed by another conversation about why he was alone. That afternoon, while walking through a quiet bookstore downtown, Caleb noticed a woman sitting near the window, carefully repairing the torn cover of an old book with a tiny brush. Her name, he would later learn, was Hannah Brooks. She was 29, worked at a community library, and had the unusual habit of repairing books that other people considered too damaged to save. Caleb approached her nervously and explained his ridiculous situation. He expected her to laugh and walk away. Instead, Hannah studied his face for a moment and agreed, not because she wanted money or attention, but because she recognized the loneliness behind his request. That evening, Hannah arrived at the restaurant wearing a simple blue dress and carrying the calm confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. Caleb's family immediately adored her. His grandmother held Hannah's hands and smiled as though she had been waiting years to meet her. Caleb watched Hannah patiently listen to stories she had never heard before, laugh at jokes she didn't understand, and quietly refill Margaret's water when she noticed her glass was empty. For the first time in years, Caleb saw his family relaxed around him. But something unexpected happened. He stopped pretending. As the dinner continued, Hannah began noticing the little things Caleb did when he thought nobody was watching. He adjusted his grandmother's chair, checked whether she was comfortable, and secretly asked the waiter to bring her favorite dessert even though it wasn't on the menu. Beneath his reserved exterior was a man who cared deeply but had become frightened of showing it. And Hannah understood that fear because she had her own. Years earlier, she had watched her mother struggle through a painful divorce, and since then Hannah had convinced herself that loving someone meant eventually losing them. After dinner, Caleb offered to drive Hannah home. They sat in the parked car outside her small townhouse, neither eager to end the evening. They talked about books, childhood dreams, regrets, and the strange ways people learn to protect themselves. Caleb eventually admitted that he had not asked her to pretend because he wanted to impress his family. He had done it because he was tired of feeling like the broken piece everyone was trying to fix. Hannah told him she understood, because sometimes people didn't need fixing. Sometimes they simply needed someone willing to stay long enough to see who they really were. The next morning, Caleb expected everything to return to normal. Instead, he found himself reaching for his phone several times before finally sending Hannah a message asking whether she had gotten home safely. She responded warmly, and that simple exchange became another message, then another. Days became weeks. Caleb began volunteering at Hannah's library on Saturdays, where he discovered that she had been organizing a donation program for children who couldn't afford books. He used his architectural skills to redesign a neglected reading room, and together they turned it into a bright community space filled with shelves, comfortable chairs, and handwritten notes from local families. But just when their friendship began turning into something deeper, Caleb's father returned to Charleston unexpectedly. The old wounds Caleb had buried came rushing back. His father apologized, explaining that he had spent years ashamed of the man he had become and had been too afraid to face his son. Caleb wanted to forgive him, but fear told him that forgiveness meant forgetting everything. Hannah never pushed him toward either choice. She simply reminded him that forgiveness did not erase the past, sometimes it only meant refusing to let the past control the future. Weeks later, Caleb stood outside the library after closing time, holding the same torn book Hannah had repaired when they first met. He finally understood why that image had stayed with him. Hannah never threw broken things away simply because they were damaged. She believed they could still hold stories worth reading. He looked at her and realized he no longer wanted a pretend relationship, a convenient companion, or someone to satisfy his family's expectations. He wanted the woman who had seen his fears and never used them against him. He wanted to build something real, slowly and honestly, without pretending that either of them had a perfect past. Months later, Caleb's grandmother attended the opening of the renovated reading room. She watched Caleb and Hannah standing together near the doorway, their hands naturally finding each other, and quietly smiled. The fake girlfriend from one unforgettable night had become the woman Caleb chose every morning, not because she completed something missing inside him, but because together they had learned that love wasn't about finding someone without scars. It was about finding someone who treated those scars gently. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson Caleb ever learned. Sometimes the person who enters your life as a temporary answer becomes the permanent reason you finally believe in tomorrow. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that real love can grow from unexpected kindness, please support the video with a like, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and let us know what you felt while listening. And before you go, leave a comment telling us this: would you have taken the chance on love if it began with something as unexpected as a fake relationship? Because sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin with a story we never intended to write.